Hello, welcome to Spacemen Pod. I'm Ian Edmund.
And I'm Mark Lassells.
And today we have got the last part of our interview with Mark Refoy, talking about the work he's done since leaving Spiritualized, although there's a little bit of Spiritualized callback at the very beginning of it. It's a really interesting part, I think, obviously mostly about his work with Slipstream. It also goes into detail about what he did with Pet Shop Boys, which has been mentioned in a couple of the previous parts of the interview, but it's great to hear a bit more detail about that. So, without any further ado, let's get straight on with that. Welcome back again to Mark Refoy. We've had wonderful chats so far about pre-Spacemen 3 bands in Northampton, about time in Spacemen 3, time in Spiritualized, with fantastic talk about Pure Phase last time. And we've got lots of stuff that we can still talk about because of all the things that Mark has been releasing in the years since leaving Spiritualized. Just before we get back into those, a couple of remaining Spiritualized related stories that we didn't really talk about last time. Mark, you were talking about the guitar that you were playing us last time being one that you played on Pure Phase, and that you associate that as your Pure Phase guitar, but you had a different one for Laser Guided Melodies, which I gather is no longer with you.
Yeah, that would be my Gretch Country Gem, which I bought with the first bit of money that we had in Spiritualized, which wasn't much. It was a couple of grand or something, but to me it was like a fortune. And the first thing I did was go to Birmingham, and I'd always promised myself I'd get a top-notch guitar, and I'd always loved Gretches. I got this Gretch Country Gem 1963, the same model that George Harrison had in the Beatles, in the same year, I think. Yeah, I used that on Laser Guided Melodies as well as my Telecaster and my Epiphone Casino. There was a gig that we did in Amsterdam. It was like a one-off gig at the Melkweg, I think it was. Before the gig, we went out and sampled the delights of the city, as you do in Amsterdam. And I got back stupidly late in the morning, about 3 or 4 o'clock, to the hotel. And I was woken up 3 or 4 hours later by one of the roadies who was just shaking me, saying, Mark, get up, get up, get up. The guitars have been stolen from the van. And I was in a complete daze. And I went downstairs. And he'd said originally that Jason's guitars had been nicked. And I must admit, inside I was thinking, oh, that's bad news, but I'm glad they're not mine that's been nicked. But anyway, we got to the van, and for some reason they parked the van outside the hotel, and they'd left all the kit in the van. I don't know to this day why that happened, but you could see that the van had been broken into, and he looked into the back, and he came out and he went, oh no, it's not Jason's guitars, Mark, it's yours. Oh my God. And they'd nicked, as well as my guitars, they'd nicked some of Johnny's cymbals as well. Yeah, my Gretch and my Epiphone had been nicked, but luckily they didn't nick the Telecaster. So I was just in a complete hungover state of shock.
Oh, awful.
So yeah, I always associate my Gretch with Laser Guided Melodies, and then with the insurance money of the stolen Gretch and Epiphone, I got my Fender Jaguar. So that's why I associate it with, Pure Phase. And I don't know why I got a Fender Jaguar. I bought it in Coventry, and I think Kate was saying how much she liked Fender Jaguars. And that kind of put the idea in my head. Oh yeah, Jaguars. I never really thought about them.
Seemed to work out.
Yeah.
And that's the one that you've had restored recently, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right, yeah. When I got my Fender Jaguar, it was obvious from the get-go that it had been like resprayed and tampered with in the past, but not in a good way. It wasn't a good job. I lived with that for years, with that guitar. A lot of people suggested how much they liked the battered sort of like finish on it, but it wasn't battered in a real sort of genuine like way that some people have been playing it for over the years. It was more like misuse and not very good restorations, etc. So I just thought, I'm going to take it back to the beginning and get it completely done up. So I saw this program on TV where this guy restored the bass guitar of Hot Chocolate, and I thought, that looks really good. So I contacted him, and yeah, he completely restored it, got it back to its original finish, and I thought he did a great job.
Well, for any equipment heads, he's done a video on YouTube about restoring that guitar for you.
Yeah,
So I've got
that's
a link to
right,
that so people can
Yeah.
enjoy it. There's another story, I gather, about the trappings of fame when you were one day in a pub in Northampton.
That's right, yeah. It was a place called the White Elephant, and I don't know whether this was when I was in Spiritualized or sometime after. I think it was sometime after I'd left, not that long after. There were these two girls. I was waiting at the bar, and there were these two girls chatting away, and I got wind of their conversation, and I heard them say, one of them was going, "Oh, which one do you fancy most? Is it Jason or Mark?" And I was thinking, wow, they must be talking about us. And I got nearer, and I caught one of their eyes, and she said, "Oh, I like them both." I can't remember whether she said she preferred Jason or Mark, but she looked straight at me, and there wasn't a flicker of recognition. And I just thought, what they're talking about. And all of a sudden, they were looking at this video jukebox, and it was Take That. And the penny dropped. It was like, oh, there's obviously two members of Take That called Jason and Mark. They were obviously talking about them.
Classic.
Oh gosh, so near. There you go. Well, let's get back onto your solo things. We started talking about the first Slipstream album last time because of course there's bits of crossover from the end of Spiritualized, but that's an interesting sounding album. You got production on there from Zion Train. I gather that they encouraged you to do a few different things with some of the songs that you already had for that.
Yeah, they were very keen to about my cover of Kraftwerk's Computer Love.
Well, it's this sort of crazy glam rocker at the end,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah, they were suggested by a guy called Chris who worked at Zion Train at Shea, and he knew Zion Train, and he said, "We think we should get you in the studio with them because they're like this reggae dub collective, which they might be able to get a good sound for you, producing in the studio." So I thought, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. So I met up with them in London, and they seemed like a great bunch of people. And we got to the studio, and we had to do it in what they call downtime, which is when it was being used at night. So we would work all the way through the night, from about 10 o'clock at night until 9 in the morning or something like that, for a solid week. Well, we'd get to the studio, and they would cleanse the atmosphere with old dub and reggae, which I thought was a great idea. So while we were setting up stuff and just getting into the studio, they would be playing all this like King Tubby and whatever, brilliant. And then I'd done this version of Computer Love, which was it was a guitar version of Kraftwerk's Computer Love, and I'd stuck very sort of like faithfully to the original arrangement, but just played it all on guitars with a drum machine in the background. And they were saying, yeah, it's all very pretty and everything, but yeah, let's do it with a Gary Glitter stomping beat in the background. And initially I thought, I don't know about that. But then we tried it because we were just playing live in the studio, and it worked really well. At one point he said, yeah, there's this record by a group called Lieutenant Pigeon called Mouldy Old Dough, and the B-side is this song called The Villain. And my ears just pricked up because I went, I know that. My parents bought me that in about 1972 or something like that. And I loved The Villain. It was just like this, it was almost like weird experimental krautrock. You wouldn't have expected that from this group, Lieutenant Pigeon, because it was this novelty hit. I don't know if you know it. Yeah. I think it's great, but it was like a novelty hit of the time. Very strange record, but this B-side, The Villain, was great. And it had the same sort of like proto stomp of like, glam stomp sort of thing, which we incorporated in our version of Computer Love. It just worked.
No, it's unlike anything else that you've got on that album, but it does it. It works really well. You've got a bit of history with Kraftwerk, really, haven't you, in terms of when you first saw them?
Oh yeah, when I first saw them, that was 40 years ago, coming up to almost exactly 40 years ago. It was the last days of June, maybe even early July. A mate of mine had, it was that John Bello guy. I was in the Syndromes with him, and he had some spare tickets for Kraftwerk. And he said, would I want to come along? And I went, oh, yeah, why not? I knew nothing about them except I was aware of Autobahn, and I knew that they were German guys who just played electronic music. That was all I knew about them. And 4 of us went down on the train to Hammersmith Palais, and on the way down, we were chatting about, the forthcoming gig, and one of the guys was not a fan of electronic music, and he said that he had a ticket to see Bob Dylan on the same night rather, at Earl's Court, and he was a big long-haired hippie guy, and he was saying, oh, I don't know about this. I don't know why I'm going to this gig. I should be going to see Bob Dylan at Earl's Court. And these other guys were saying, oh, no, Kraftwerk would be great. You made the right decision. Anyway, we got to Hammersmith Palais, and I was thinking also that my mum had danced there with Danny Blanchflower, the footballer, about 30 or 40 years previously. Actually, no, not that long. It would have been about 20 maybe. Anyway, that was in my mind, and also the Clash, White Man and Hammersmith Palais, which was the Clash, one of my favourite bands, to this day they are. So there was all these thoughts going around my head, and there was no support band, and there were these curtains across the stage, so you couldn't see anything. And then you became aware of this very quiet electronic music started playing in the background, almost ambient. I wasn't aware of that word at the time, but it was like ambient music. And then this, after a while, this guttural German voice intoned over the PA. I can't remember what they said because it was all in German, but it was like something along the lines of, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome from Dusseldorf, Germany, Kraftwerk, or whatever. Then these 2 guys, which unexpectedly, these 2 bearded roadies drew the curtains aside, and then there was this fantastic stage presentation, 4 massive video screens with each member of Kraftwerk in front of like keyboards and computers or whatever. That was it. They were just absolutely phenomenal. It was the Computer World Tour. So they basically did the whole of that album. But I didn't know any of the stuff, but the whole spectacle and the sound of it just completely blew me away.
Sometimes it's just a setup you need, isn't it? It doesn't matter how familiar you are. I mean, I remember the first time I saw another one of your favorites, New Order, which was at the Reading Festival 1989, the same day, in fact, that you played earlier on with Spacemen 3.
I remember walking away from that.
Yeah.
Me and Johnny and Jason and Kate, and I could hear New Order come on stage, and I heard Bernard say, yeah, we've seen all you Mission fans all day picking boxes. And I remember thinking, fuck, I want to stay and watch it.
Well, I'm sorry to have to tell you, it was absolutely amazing. One of the best things I'd ever seen. And I did similarly to you with Kraftwerk. I didn't really know that much New Order at the time. But it really didn't matter from the moment it was on. It was fantastic.
I'll chip in my New Order tale. I saw New Order at Glastonbury in '87 I had Blue Monday, as most people did, and I had no idea what they were going to be like. And I was perhaps even going to go and see some of the other stages. Someone said, no, you really need to watch this. And it was, again, I had a similar experience. And I remember after about the 5th song thinking, I haven't recognized a single piece of music. Every single thing has been incredible. The law of averages says that they're going to play something I won't like. And they didn't. The entire thing was just completely mind-blowing. They were fantastic.
That's brilliant. Fantastic.
Long time ago. God.
Yeah. I first saw them at the Roadmender and in '81. And they were just, we didn't know them. We knew that they were like ex-members of Joy Division. That's why we went. But we didn't know the names of them or anything like that. And the only one we recognised was Bookie, because he had the beard. And he was like an old man. It was like, wow, oh yeah, that's that guy. Oh, and they've got a girl on keyboards as well. They just looked and sounded utterly out of this world. They were just mega.
Well, going back to your first Slipstream album, I mean, the Computer Love is really the exception on there, isn't it? The rest of it, I think it sets the tone for a lot of what will follow with your work, in that there are definite links to some of the things that were going on in Spacemen 3 and Spiritualized, but it doesn't sound like it. you're not trying to reproduce the same sound, but there are things which are informed by, I suppose, that simplicity in some of the songs.
Yeah.
And you managed to put your own stamp on it, I think, pretty early. I mean, there are things which are a little more in that I suppose, Riverside and Sense Around and the like. And I said, but there's also getting some pacier, slightly rockier stuff on there, and that develops a bit more on your second album, on Be Groovy or Leave. Now that's a lot more varied. Is that a deliberate attempt to try and do a few different styles?
I think Be Groovy or Leave was, I still had all my Porter Studio cassette demos, which I'd had for years. And Be Groovy or Leave is like, it would have sounded more like the first album if Zion Train had produced it, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
But we went to Woodbine Studios with to get John Rivers to record it and, in essence, produce it and arrange it. And that has very much got his sort of stamp on it. It's more conventional sounding than the first album, and I suppose it's more sort of songwriter-y. I mean, I was listening to lots of Brian Wilson at the time, and Big Star, and always the Beatles, and
yeah, I mean, I agree with what you say about it having a more conventional producer feel, but there's a good mix of different things on there. From I mean, the one that Shay chose as the single, Madeline, I suppose, is the most droney thing on it. But there's poppy type things like your opener in Dancing Mood, and more of the sorts of things we've associated you with your guitar phrases and picking out on something like Scars, which I gather got some attention from another well-known guitarist.
Yeah. Yeah, that was I spoke to you about meeting Johnny Marr, didn't I?
You told us about when you met him after that Pet Shop Boys gig. Yeah.
And I said, would you mind if I sent you some, Slipstream stuff? And he said, yeah, sure. So I sent him, the first album and Be Groovy or Leave and Side Effects, And then I pretty much forgot that I'd sent him this stuff. And then I was at a party. It was Neil Tennant's 50th birthday party a couple of years later, and Johnny Marr was there, and Pete Gledall knows Johnny from working with Pet Shop Boys, and Pete had mixed my stuff, and Pete sort of went, "Oh, come out here, Mark, come over here, say hello to Johnny." So I thought, oh God, this is a bit awkward. I just went over and I said, "All right, mate." He said, "Yeah, all right. How's it going?" I said, "Yeah, not too bad." And he said, "Yeah, I really like one of your songs that you sent me." And I went, great, thanks." And he said, "I can't remember what it's called, but it kind of goes like, da 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 da, da 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 da." And I went, "Oh, I don't know about that. I don't recognise that." And he went, "Is it called Scars?" And I went, "Oh yeah, the one that goes da 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 da." And then he went, "Yeah, I'm thinking of covering it, but I might change the lyrics." And I went, yeah, feel free. Go ahead.
Do what you like with it.
Do what you like. I don't know whether he ever did. I've never met him since, so...
Not that I'm aware of, but it's nice that the idea was there.
Took an interest anyway.
Yeah.
Well, you talked about having also sent him Side Effects. I mean, Shay were putting out quite a lot of singles.
Yeah.
And it's a good collection of all of those things and a few other little rarities. I hadn't listened to it. I've got to confess to you, I hadn't listened to it for quite a while until we were getting ready for this. And I was happy. I remember going to see you in '99, I think, upstairs at the garage. And so I know, okay, that's a few years after this was out. But still at that point, I think you had only had your 2 regular albums in this collection. So I was hoping there might be. And well, I remember it being a really good gig. I did enjoy that a lot, but I was always disappointed that I never got to hear Up in Heaven live, because I thought surely that's a shoo-in for a rocking interlude there.
Yeah. We used to do that live a lot. Yeah, I don't know why we didn't. Why didn't we do it that night?
But that was because that was one of 2 7-inches that were released at the same time. Right, and was it deliberately selected to be such a contrast, because you've got Up in Heaven, which is very full-on rocker, but Comeback's a got a different atmosphere to it.
Yeah, Come Back, actually, I kind of appropriated the riff of Feels Like Going Home. Down, 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 down.
Oh, yeah.
And I used that in Come Back, but, you know, it's a different song, obviously.
There's some serious guitar on that track. You really go for it on the wah wah.
That wasn't planned. We just didn't know when to end the song, and we were doing it live in Woodbine in Leamington Spa with John Rivers, and I think he might have said, you know, do it again. So that was one of the takes of the song. That's just the way it came out, and
you find a really big sound in it. I think it sounds great.
Yeah, he really did a great job on that. And that was the version that I would have to transcribe that bit of guitaring at the end and memorize it, because I didn't plan it, you know. And that's how we used to do it live.
It's got a lovely woozy effect on some of the guitar, but whether it's just the bending of the notes or something, but it gives it a really nice atmosphere in there.
Yeah, it's the wah and the fuzz and the whatever. Yeah.
There is a little more from that original era, but it's not long after those first couple of albums and the compilation that Slipstream sort of gets put on hold, really, for a while, and there are other things going on. I mean, you've talked to us already today and a few times previously about your time in Pet Shop Boys, but for anyone who's not familiar with that, how did it all come about in the first place?
I had been introduced to Vanessa and Andy, who used to be in a band called Ultrasound. Now, I was aware of Ultrasound, but I'd never heard them. But I knew they'd got a lot of press attention. And the guy who introduced us was a guy called Tony Tomlin, who was a Northampton-based musician, but has subsequently moved to Bristol. And I think he was living in Bristol when he introduced me to Vanessa and Andy. And Tony, incidentally, is now behind Cuts. I don't know if you've heard of CUTS, Cuts. They do a lot of soundtrack music and stuff like that. Anyway, Tony introduced me to Andy and Vanessa, and we started this band, which Tony eventually didn't want to be a part of. So it was whittled down to me and Vanessa and Andy, and we called ourselves the Sunshine Valley Dance Band, which was a bit of a joke name, really. And Vanessa was really friendly, and probably still is, with Bick Hayes, who was in Levitation, I believe, who we had toured with in Spiritualized. Anyway, Bick came to see us when we did a couple of gigs, and he was a good guy, and I remembered him, he remembered me. And one day I got home from work, and there was a message on my answer phone. This would have been the end of 2001. And I don't think I had a mobile phone. There was a message on my answer phone from Vanessa saying, "Oh, Mark, do you fancy playing in Pet Shop Boys? Give me a ring." I was like, what the fuck? So I called her, and she said that Bick had been on the phone to her, asking her if the other Ultrasound guitarist, who I think was called Richard, would be interested in playing guitars in Pet Shop Boys. And Vanessa said, well, I don't know about Richard, but Mark definitely will. And Bick said, oh, I didn't think of asking Mark. Oh, yeah, will you ask him for me? So Vanessa then asked me in that answer phone message. And so I called her back up, and she explained all that. And the reason why Bick was asking me was because he was managed by the same management who were managing Pet Shop Boys at the time. So they asked him if he wanted to play in Pet Shop Boys on this forthcoming tour that was going to promote the Release album that they put out subsequently in 2002. And he, I asked Vanessa to ask me, so I called Vanessa. She put me in touch with Bick, who then put me in touch with their management and arranged a meeting with me and Chris, and that's how it transpired.
What's it like auditioning for them? What were they looking out for?
I didn't audition. I went to meet them in this office in King's Cross. I was met by their manager at the time, called this lady called Mitch, and she was this very energetic Australian girl who was full of like, you know, enthusiastic comments, and great person. And she met me, and she introduced me to all these other people in the office who I didn't know. She said, "This is Mark. He's going to be playing with us on the next tour." And I thought, bloody hell, I haven't even met them yet, and she's saying that I'm going to be playing with them. And she said, "Oh, the boys are just in an interview at the moment, so just wait here, and then you'll see them after this interview." And I thought, I could hear Neil speaking, and everybody knows what Neil Tennant sounds like. And I thought, oh yeah, that's Neil's voice. And I thought, oh yeah, there's another guy, Chris, but I won't recognise him because nobody knows what he looks like. But that's part of his stage persona, that you don't know what he looks like. And anyway, their interview finished, and I was introduced to them. I went into this room, and I saw Chris. And I thought, oh God, yeah, of course I recognise him. That's Chris Lowe. It's funny. He's one of those people who you think you won't recognise, but you do when you see him. It's a very strange, a weird aspect of celebrity status, I suppose. The celebrity that you think you don't recognise, but you do.
That was a few years you were either touring with them, and you did a bit of playing on some of the B-sides for the singles for that album. Also, I think took part in what turned out to be their only John Peel session.
That's right, yeah.
And Peel makes a good comment in the chatter between the tracks, really. He says he wasn't going to talk about this, but some people have been in touch. He's saying, if I hadn't told you it was Pet Shop Boys, if I just said it was, I can't remember what he says, some esoteric made-up band name, you know, you'd all be raving about it. And it's a great session, and some significant live things as well. You that Live 8 in Moscow.
Yeah, that was great.
And you can see bits of that on YouTube. Just as with the other things that you've played on, I think it's instantly recognizably you're playing on it, really. You know, even though it's taking part in their songs.
Yeah. Well, when I first worked with them in the first rehearsals, I was really far more wary about it than playing with Spiritualized or Spacemen or anything like that, because I just thought, how am I going to fit in? I know nothing about electronics. I thought I was going to have to sync my guitar up to a computer and get it midified and all that sort of thing, because they were so part of that electronic pop thing. I thought, how are guitars going to fit in this? Even though I knew that Johnny Marr had played on their latest album, I still hadn't heard the songs that that they had done on that. But I did a couple of weeks beforehand. I got a CD of the songs that we were to be rehearsing for this tour, and that gave me a better picture of what I was meant to be doing. And between the two of us, me and Vic, we worked out beforehand the different parts that we'd play. Vic was going to play more of the lead kind of stuff, and I would play the simpler, more chord orientated stuff. It wasn't as cut and dried as that, but that was kind of like our game plan. And I needn't have worried, because Neil and Chris, they are just fantastic people to work for. They are very specific taskmasters, but they basically said, I would play along, and if they liked the sound of it, they just went, yeah, that's great. If they didn't, they'd say, oh, don't do that. It was as simple as that. We were given, to a certain extent, quite free rein to play along and do what we wanted to do, unless they specifically asked for something. But I remember playing along to, I can't remember which song, but I was doing something which I thought worked really well. And Neil just went, no, stop. No, we don't like that. That doesn't work. I went, okay. No, yeah, not a problem. But by and large, it was just not easy, but I fitted in musically.
No, it's super. I think they're really important English band of the last however long it is, 40 years or so. I think so. And I think Neil's a really clever lyricist as well.
They're fantastic people to work for. Great senses of humour. They're such a laugh. I remember Neil said to me, how do we pronounce your name, Mark? Is it Refoy or Refoy? And I said, well, if you're my mum answering the phone, it's Refoy. But if you went to school with me in the 70s, it's Refoy. And he went, Refoy it is. We were doing a gig in Leicester, and at the encores, and Neil always introduced each member of the band. And just before he came to me, Chris swiveled round in his chair And he just went, Refoy, who knows?
Well, you mentioned then that came out of the contact you'd had with Vanessa and Sunshine Valley Dance Band. I was lucky enough to see you playing at one time in the early 2000s at some strange venue in London that took ages to find.
Yeah, it was in the middle of that junction.
Yeah,
in North London somewhere.
It was bizarre.
Yeah. I remember the gig, but I can't remember the name of the venue.
But I remember thinking you sort of delineated the sounds that you were after in that, and also Slipstream, who you were still doing at the time. I remember you having a couple of different websites in early days of the internet with a few demos that we could download. And although you didn't release anything with that band, we did have some demos to enjoy, some of which you later repurposed as Slipstream songs, and also a cover. Which I think I'll pass over to Mark.
Yeah, I was surprised you did that cover of West Coast Pop Art Experimental Band, and when I played the 3 songs from Sunshine Valley Dance Band, when that suddenly popped up, I mean, my jaw dropped, because most people have no idea who those guys are. Although that song did appear on an animated soundtrack a couple of years ago, I think called Isle of Dogs, or it's called something like that, Dog Island, Isle of Dogs, something like that. A kind of stop motion animated thing. Yeah, well, my jaw hit the floor when I heard that. It's always been one of my favorite tunes. Have you been a big fan of theirs, or was it just that song that popped out? It
was that song that popped out because round about that time I was introduced to it by a mutual friend, and he said, "Oh, play this, I think you'll like this." And yeah, I loved it straight away.
It's a kind of one-off, isn't it? There's no other song quite like it.
Yeah, exactly. And I bought an album of theirs, which hang on, let me see if I've got it at hand. I know it's here somewhere. Oh yeah, right behind Be Groovy or Leave, quite weirdly. Yeah, it's this one, West Coast Experimental Pop Art Band.
Oh, but, yeah, that's a kind of reissue of the first album, isn't it? Which is worth about thousands of dollars for an original copy. Yeah.
But the versions of
very different on that version.
Yeah,
of it,
it's very different, totally different. So I don't think I've got the version on record that made me want to cover it. But it was suggested to me by a friend at the time, and I said to Vanessa and Andy, and I think Johnny was there as well in the studio at the time, and they all said, yeah, it's a good tune. Yeah, so we did it there and then on my old, I had a digital recorder at the time, a Roland workstation, and we just did it on that. There's no bass on it. There's just me with my Epiphone Casino, and Tony did this drone on the synth all the way through it, and Vanessa did a bit of backing harmonies, and to be honest, we didn't think anything of it. I put it up on SoundCloud a few years ago, and it's got like about 5,000 plays, whereas my other stuff has got nowhere near. So yeah, that's quite a turn up for the books, really. That song, yeah.
No, it's a great song. There was another one from that session, was there, which you did later on as a Slipstreams track, that Maybe Next Time. I think that kind of follows the little series of sort of stomping dance floor fillers, which you did around. There were a few of those kind of big opening tracks.
Yeah.
But I mean, the Sunshine Valley Dance Band version of that is certainly impressive.
I think we did that with one of Vanessa's friends, Nick Terry, who I think produced Ultrasound. And he went on to work with other people. The guitarist from Sway, who left Sway, Bernard Butler, and people like that. And Nick knew his way around the studio, and I think we did that version of Maybe Next Time. Oh no! We did that in Woodbine. I think the version that you're referencing is the one we did at Woodbine.
Well, I guess tying in with the time that you were both doing that and also time in Pet Shop Boys meant that there was a break in Slipstream's activities, because Be Groovy or Leave comes out in '97, and the next time we get an album is not until 2003 when Transcendental comes out. And as I've been made very aware recently, that was largely not stuff that you had been working on at that time. A lot of that was stuff that you've been stockpiling over the years as well. Yeah. I have to say that really surprised me when I discovered that, because I've always felt it sounds like a really cohesive album.
I think so.
Wow.
And
It flows so well.
Well, until very recently, I would definitely have had it as my favourite. I just think it's wonderful. Some of the sounds on some of them are extraordinary. I'm a massive fan of Just You and Me. I know that we're both very fond of Midnight Train as well.
That's just fabulous, true.
Yeah. And no, it's just got a great atmosphere, really. I know that you'd started touring again for the odd date around that time, but by this point, it's yourself and Johnny is really the core of what there is.
Yeah, because the band Slipstream kind of like fizzled out really, and once I'd done the work with Pet Shop Boys, I thought, I might as well, reactivate Slipstream, but I wanted to do it just on a more, not quieter, but a smaller setup. So me and Johnny just agreed it would just be the two of us. And even though we subsequently over the years, we played with band members since, it's just the core of me and Johnny, and probably always will be, But Transcendental, because that was released by Enraptured, it got a bit of, attention and reviews and that. So that's what gave me the impetus to restart Slipstream, but just with myself and Johnny. We as you just said, we started touring. We never really toured. We've only just done one-off dates.
Yeah.
And that's just been like word of mouth, and more often than not in Northampton. Transcendental was a collection of demos and home demos, Porter Studio demos, and songs that we had done in Woodbine, which we couldn't fit onto Be Groovy or Leave.
Well, it's bookended, of course, with those two different versions of Everything and Anything. The demo single version, which Jack had put out a few years earlier, and that ended up being used, of course, in the TV series Ideal as the first of a few tracks that's there. Hello, everyone listening. This is Ian doing a little bit that I'm dropping in after the interview. What's happening at this point is that we're playing Mark a little piece which I'd recorded the previous night with Graham Duff, who is the author, amongst many other things, of the TV series Ideal, which used several pieces of Slipstream music. I couldn't announce that before Mark had seen it because I wanted to surprise him with it. So, just for clarity, the next voice you're going to hear is Graham Duff.
In the late 90s, I was DJing on a late night show in Brighton called Totally Wired, which is still going to this day, although I don't present it. And at that time, I'd been into Spacemen 3. I had not all their albums, but Playing with Fire, Perfect Prescription, Taking Drugs to Make Music, to take drugs to, and a few of the singles and stuff. So I was definitely a fan, but I wasn't like a completist. And then I'd seen Sonic Boom play live a few times doing his more sort of abstracted stuff. I'd seen Spiritualized a couple of times, including at Glastonbury and so on. And I'd even played Lupine Howl on my radio show as well. I don't know how many people can say that, but and I was aware of I was aware of Slipstream, but I hadn't heard them. And then there was a guy called Jack Trevelyan who ran a couple of labels, Enraptured and Endorphin. And I'd played a couple of his things. And he had a batch of, I think, 6 singles he was releasing all at once by several different artists. And they were all pretty good. I think Jack had excellent taste. But the one that absolutely leapt at me was Slipstream's Everything and Anything. And I don't know how many times I must have played it on the show. And it just lodged in my mind as being like a classic track, really. I think it's a classic melody, beautifully sung, beautifully articulated, and very subtle as well, which I think as some of spiritualized stuff has edged towards sometimes being a bit bombastic, not necessarily in a bad way. I think Slipstream have got more subtle and more nuanced and more varied in their approach, and I really admire them for that. But anyway, I love this song, and it was one I still regularly played, and I put it on mixtapes for people and so on. And then in sort of the early noughties, when I started doing my show Ideal for BBC 3, which was about a drug dealer starring Johnny Vegas, I was in charge. I put myself in charge of choosing all the soundtrack music, and it was one of the greatest pleasures of the whole project, really. And I knew that I wanted to use that tune in some capacity on there, and it ended up being used in a very direct way, in that Johnny's character Moz put it on to seduce a girl that he was really into and was like pretending to sing along with us. So it wasn't. Well, as you may know, in cinema and film, there's different types of music. There's diegetic and non-diegetic, and diegetic is stuff that's happening within the story, whereas non-diegetic is stuff that's the soundtrack that's added for the audience. But it was diegetic. It was right in there. So he was referring to it. He was putting it on, saying, "Oh, you're going to love this," and so, which I thought was a nice tribute to a really lovely song. And the scene got a great response, and Johnny loved the tune, and it was great, really. And I carried on really using more Slipstream music in the series, just because it's so good. It's so atmospheric. Some of it, I'm sure Mark wouldn't mind me saying this, but some of it really reminds me of Popol Vuh, which I think is a big influence on Mark. And of course, that's very cinematic, very soundtrack-like music. So I think after The Fall and Coil, they're the band I used the most music of on the show. There's a track called Zoomer Wave, which I used on a few occasions, which looks absolutely beautiful. And it was weird because Mark got in touch at one point and said, "Oh, I've got this track I want to play you." Because by that stage, I'd met Mark and I'd met Johnny, and I thought they were really nice guys, and I'd been to see them live and so on. So we got on, and we sort of we were in contact. He said, "I'll send you this track," and so he sent me this track called Psycho Paul. Which was about the character Psycho Paul in Ideal, although the only lyrics I think are Psycho Paul. But it was a great tune, and I played it to death, and I just thought, I can't not have this in the show. And so in the end, I had the character of Psycho Paul singing along, lip syncing with the track. So again, it was that thing of like not just using the music, but making the music integral to the action that was happening in the show. And yeah, I still listen to their stuff now. I'm still excited whenever Mark says, "Oh, got some new tracks to play." I'm always thrilled, and I always find, it's all good, but there's always 2 or 3 tracks on any Slipstream album or bunch of demos. I think, oh wow, and they more recently they did a cover of that Daniel Johnston track. Is it True Love? Is it called True Love Will Find You in the End? And I just thought, this is the best version of this I've ever heard. And plenty of people have done versions of it, but I just thought, no, this is the definitive version. Certainly better than the original for my money. So yeah, I think their music's great. I think Mark and Johnny are both incredibly talented people, and obviously they both played with lots of other people as well. I mean, if you took away Slipstream and Spiritualized and Spacemen 3 from Mark's CV, you'd still be left with an impressive list of achievements. So yeah, I'm honoured to consider them friends, and I love the music. I'm going to stop gushing now.
So sorry to spring that on you as a bit of a surprise there.
Not at all. Good old Graham.
You mentioned Zoomer Wave. That's an absolute killer. Such a gorgeous tune.
That was there was a time when I was obsessed with listening to Judy Sill. I don't know if you've heard of Judy Sill.
I haven't.
No.
American singer-songwriter. She wrote probably, if you are aware of her, you will have been aware of a song that she did called "The Kiss," which was on the Allegro Whistle Test way back in the 70s. Anyway, there was a time for a few years that all I listened to was Judy Sill. I was completely obsessed with her music, and apparently there was a picture of her on a beach called Zuma Beach somewhere in California, and she was waving at the photographer, and I thought, oh yeah, Zuma Wave, that'll do. Because I'm crap at getting song titles, and I thought that will do for that one.
Graham used a few of your other tracks as well. Psycho Paul's got to be the standout one because it integrates so well into what's going on at that time. But other nice atmospherics, a couple, 1 or 2 that haven't appeared on any album. So I don't know if were you still writing them with the hope that they'd be good for him to use, or were they just some of your demos and ideas?
Graham would always get in touch and say, oh, I really like such and such a song. Can I use it in Ideal? And I was absolutely blown away that he would do that, and to this day I'm just so blown away by that.
Well, I think we need treading a slightly fine line here, not wanting to make it sound like we're just being like super sycophantic to someone who's been kind enough to come on and talk to us, but I know that both of us will very much encourage people who haven't done so yet to check things out. I mean, I think there's no
Indeed.
doubt about it. If it weren't for the fact that there's a Spacemen 3 and Spiritualized connection, I most certainly would never have come across your other music and probably wouldn't have listened to it. But I'm so glad that that has happened, because there is a huge amount which is so accomplished. And I think it's around this time, the time that those things first appeared in Ideal and the time that you've reactivated things with yourself and Johnny, that I think it really kicks in. I mean, it's not like I don't like those early albums. I think they're fantastic. And like I said, Transcendental had been my favorite up to that point. But then when you come back in 2008 with Mantra, a couple of things I think that have happened. Firstly, presumably from your contact with Pet Shop Boys and with Pete Hill, the production takes a different turn.
Yeah.
But also, I wonder if this is some of the ideas that you had left over from Sunshine Valley Dance Band, that on there you've got a bit more straightforward in the songwriter way, I suppose in a way similar to Be Groovy or Leave, but it seems a bit more dynamic. I mean, something like Burn Till You Die.
Well, when I was in Pet Shop Boys, in about, I think this was about 04, 05, there was a guy who worked for them called Bob Krauser, who was a genius mixer, arranger, producer, and he offered to mix one of my tracks because he was moving to a new studio, and he wanted something to work on just to get a feel for his studio. So I said, yeah, great, thanks, Bob. And he used the track Burn Till You Die, and his mix appeared on Mantra. And I subsequently asked him if he wanted to mix future tracks, but he wasn't able to. So we were rehearsing for Live 8, and Pete was asking me about how the mixing was going with Bob Krauser. I said, yeah, it's great. He mixed Burn Till You Die, but you know, he's not going to do any more. You know, I haven't got the time or the money at the moment. And he offered then and there to mix our stuff. So the next time we were free, I went down to his studio in London. I brought my old laptop at the time, and Pete mixed what became the Mantra album. And it's really Pete who has completely transformed the sound of what Slipstream were doing at the time. And he's got this real vision of what a track could sound like, and he will take like the raw version that I've done, which I thought was a pretty good versions of tracks, and he will take them and he will be very brutal about them, and he'll cut things out, edit them, and mix them, arrange them, but still keep to the basic feel of the original, and it just peps it up and makes it better, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think it's from Mantra onwards, there's just an extra level of polish on things, really. Yeah. It just sounds a lot fuller. Yeah, the songs were always there before, but it's just great to hear them being given a chance to make more of an impression, really. Yeah. And that's a relationship that's still carrying on till today, isn't it?
Ongoing, yeah, with Pete, yeah. He's a genius. He's a full-on genius. He knows his studio inside out. He knows how to make a sound jump out of the speakers, and he's got such a vast knowledge of electronic music, and he's a fantastic DJ as well. And I mean, Graham mentioned that cover of the Daniel Johnston song, True Love Will Find You in the End. I had this image in my head of that song. I think it's a great song. I'm not really as much of a massive fan of Daniel Johnston as, well, I don't know what I mean when I'm saying that. I am a fan of Daniel Johnston, but
perhaps not so much of the mythologizing which is built
up
around.
That's exactly it. That's what I'm trying to get across. And that particular song, I thought it lends itself to having a real upbeat Motown almost vibe, Phil Spector sort of feel. So I did my version of it, my demo, and then Pete perfected it, and even more in that way, because I heard lots of versions of that song where there's this very almost like, you know, hushed reverence. Oh yeah, oh yeah, this song, oh yeah. But I thought, no, pep it up, you know, make it into a full of life, you know, and not that there's anything wrong with those other versions at all. it's just my take on it. And
yeah, well, it's got a lot of people have got a lot of different things out of that. Are you aware that you are the third member of Spacemen 3 to have made a version?
oh really?
Pete Kemper put it out as a single in '92.
I did. Pete's done a version, hasn't he?
Yeah.
I don't think I've heard Pete's version. I saw Jason do a version of it live.
Yeah, Jason did it live in his acoustic tour
Yeah.
as well,
Yeah.
which I could imagine perhaps being the one you have in mind when people being reverential, because that was...
No, it was actually a version by somebody else. It might have been Wilco.
I've heard someone else play that live, and I'm now scratching my head trying to remember who. I remember them saying, "You'll never have heard this before." I thought, well, I've got 2 versions of it by other bands at home.
As I say, Mantra feels like it's very song based, and then when you come back in 2013 with Stereo Brain Mono Heart, there are some things like that on there, like the opener and a few other things later on. But there's also a bit of a return to those atmospheric ones. We've already talked a bit about Zuma Wave, and Mark and I think we both agree that this has been our biggest surprising discovery lately. Because when I was playing all the albums in the background while writing up notes and thinking about what we were going to talk about, it's a good few weeks ago now, I started thinking, there's a little bit in the middle of this album which is working exceptionally well, and suddenly realised it's that little run of Zuma Wave into Teledrone, into Fly, which is just absolutely magnificent.
Inspired sequencing.
Who hasn't
really
heard these things and is thinking about anything of Mark's that might be worth checking out, I would strongly recommend this album and that little sequence in particular. I mean, there are other things as well. I think the thing about those ones is that they are the ones with that vaguely drony feel, and the fact that they run together makes it so wonderful. There are other things of similar nature on there, but they're separated out of it as well.
These ones have that perfect kind of rotational, find a really, really cool area with a really nice vibe and just stick at it because it sounds that good. And all those 3 tracks demonstrate that beautifully, I think. There's another one further on actually with you could have actually stuck it to it with Aurora being a similar kind of thing, which is just irresistible. Just so gorgeous, those tunes.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Mark. Thank you.
And although it's a bit more up tempo, and there's certainly a thumping beat underneath it as well, Attention feels like it could be sort of part of that as well. That's got a really good. Is that sampled the vaguely robotic voice over that, or was that something that was recorded for you? It sounds like it's an American accent with the Attention
music.
I think it's Pete treating my voice.
Oh, right.
I think, yeah. There's echoes of the whole Kraftwerk robotic voice thing, which I thought I'd just try and do for a laugh. Not for a laugh, but it just fitted, I haven't heard that in a long time.
Well, for anyone who is thinking about checking something out, that would be my recommendation for where to start. And of course, a lot of that is, I think the whole of that album is available on your SoundCloud. I know not everything you've done is, but that is.
They're all on iTunes and.
Right, of course, on Spotify and the like.
Yeah, Apple Music and Spotify. Yeah.
Bit of YouTube in there as well. I've sent a couple of those links to people, just saying you really, if you've not listened to any Slipstream before, this is the perfect introduction.
Right, thanks.
And then the last album that's been released is 2017's Out of the Blue. Again, much more back to your song-based things and a good variety of things. It's a very long album, but maybe that's just because I'm used to, because that one and Stereo Brain Mono Heart are only available by download. So it may be the fact that I'm just used to listening to the download. I only realized lately that the last few tracks are described as being extra tracks. It doesn't feel like there's a distinction when you're listening to it through there. Interesting extra tracks and some unusual cover versions. I can't believe that there's anyone else who would have covered Blue Moon and then turned it into Suicide Street Baby Train.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
inspired.
Yeah, it just happened like that. The two seem to complement each other at that tempo, and it works. Yeah,
I mean, for a modern audience, for people, I mean, all of us are of a sort of age where we can talk about the kids, the next generation on, they will be used to consuming almost all of their music digitally anyway. So what's your attitude to the fact that those last couple of albums are only digital? Because is it not just our generation that have got a hankering for having a physical product?
Good question. Well, if if I had a record deal, they wouldn't just be digital.
Right.
There would be, you know, vinyl editions as well. But will there always be vinyl? I don't know. I think there's more of a chance of vinyl having a longer life than other physical formats like CD, etc. I mean, I like CDs. You know, I like vinyl. I don't really prefer one to the other. But if I want sonic perfection, then I suppose a digital file is what you want to listen to. But the whole process of getting a record and holding it and owning it and taking it out, that whole artifact process is something that I think will carry on, you know.
That's important to a lot of us still.
Yeah.
It's interesting because with Out of the Blue, when you got Anthony Ausgang to do the cover, that would just look so cool as a big slab of vinyl.
I would love that to be on a.
It's a great slate. How did you come to get him to do it?
I think he's a contact of mine on like social media, etc. And I saw his artwork and the stuff he'd done for Pete and MGMT, and I thought, well, it's a shot in the dark. I might as well ask him, and he was well up for it. And
I ordered a 10-inch rim or something, and he did a little doodle on some of the packaging inside. It was like, oh, it's my own little Anthony Ausgang original drawing there.
Yeah, fantastic.
He's really cool.
Yeah, he's fantastic artist, great guy. Yeah, I've never met him, but you know, he's a lovely. He comes across like such a genuine guy. You know,
they're enormous, the canvases he does as well. The couple I've seen. I mean,
that's right. Yeah.
Well, those last couple
stuff.
of Slipstream albums, I mean, Johnny's input has gone up a bit as well, because there are some which he's singing on there.
Oh yeah. Johnny's a great songwriter in his own right.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, how does it work between you? Do you come along with your own ideas, or do things develop between you, or do you do any co-writing?
Johnny will have almost a completed song, and he'll present it to me, and depending on how it will fit into the two of us, then it all depends on how we work on it. Like he'll come around my place and he'll have sent me the files of the song, so I'll boot it up on Logic or whatever, and if we're playing along and it's working, and Johnny is a great barometer for if something's working or not. And we don't tend to vocalize much. We just play along, and if it works, then it's like, oh yeah, great. Or if it doesn't, it's like, no, try something else or whatever. But Johnny's the kind of guy who can, if I play him something that I'm doing, he knows in an instant how to make it better, or and his suggestions, even if they are like, oh, make it sound more like a Kraftwerk beat, and then, oh yeah, that will work, or he will suggest like, I'll shorten the intro, or change the keyboard sound. It's just these off-the-cuff remarks which completely change a feel to a song. That is an aspect of Johnny's genius, and as well as him writing his own songs as well. So some of the stuff he does with his other projects, bands, etc. And he finds that is a better forum for some of the songs he's writing. But yeah, we have an almost telepathic communication sometimes about music, and when we're doing stuff. He's a fantastic guy to work with, and you know, he's a friend as well, so all good.
It sounds like that's the kind of recipe that you've used for a long time, to kind of, rather than sit down and write the individual parts and try and mash them together, is to actually just sit and see how it sounds, and then tweak and nurture and nudge and
that's
the rest
exactly
of it.
Right, yeah.
And it works.
Well, one of the things that Graham Duff was saying earlier was a suggestion that if we didn't even consider your work with Spacemen 3 Spiritualized Slipstream, there'd still be impressive stuff to enjoy. And we've talked a bit about the time with Pet Shop Boys, but you have guested on all sorts of people's records. I mean, just the ones that I'm aware of, which I'm sure doesn't cover everything. Of course, keeping it Spaceman related, you played a little bit on the second Free Love Babies album on Will Carruthers' project there.
Oh, yeah.
And I've seen you some of these more recently than others. You've played on single by Lucigenic, She Robot, the Munros, Paul Roderick, Morning Face. A lot, not all of them, but many of them have in collaboration with
Mike
producer
Bennett.
Mike Bennett. Yeah, how did you first meet Mike?
Because I've recorded at Far Heath Studios, the guy who runs that, Angus, he called me one day and he said, "Oh, I've got this guy here called Mike Bennett, and he needs some guitar on a track. Do you fancy coming along and doing it?" I said, yeah, sure. And turns out that Mike used to manage the Full. He took the Full to Far Heath where they did some recordings, and that's how he got to know Angus. Over the years, Mike has asked me to play on various bands and projects that he's been involved with, and yeah, so that's how my connection with Mike has started and developed. Mike is a very sort of maverick ideas man, and a bit of a nutter really, but a great pop music historian and appreciator. And he had something to do with Kim Fowley. He worked with Kim Fowley at some point. He said it nearly fried his brain, but I think that's informed a lot of his musical ideas and production methods.
It certainly led to you appearing on a real variety of different things. Some of them still quite current, aren't they? I think the Lucigenic one's quite a recent.
Yeah. Yet again, another band from Manchester, that because Mike lives in Manchester, because he's also a friend of Simon Wollstonecroft, who used to play in the Full, the drummer in the Full. And so Simon, he's played on the Lucigenic single as well, and he has also written a fantastic book,
hasn't he? Just yes,
yeah.
Drum But You Can't Hide is it is now available again. There was a time when it was out of print, but now it's back, and I would strongly recommend people enjoy that. Really also, he's been doing a lot of very amusing lockdown videos when he wanders around bits of Manchester and other places and gives little histories associated with them.
It's interesting you mentioned Kim Fowley there, Mark. He was instrumental in the formation of the West Coast Pop Art Experimental Band by the main guy, Bob Markley, who I'm sure you've read about his rather dodgy interests and elsewhere, but he was the one who was introduced to them. And then, the rest is kind of history. He sort of took them on and everything else, but I don't know if Kim Fowley was dodgy, but Bob Markley certainly was.
Another thing I noticed, talking about sort of modern collaborations and the current generation of artists, is that you mixed Damien Smiler's 2020 Club, which is on SoundCloud. I mean, do you think internet is a future of collaboration and self-releases in that respect?
Oh, definitely, yeah. Although that contact with Damien initially came out of a mutual friend of mine who now lives and works in London, and he called me up and he said, "Oh, Mark, there's a young guy who's a son of a friend of mine, and he's a big fan of Spiritualized and Pet Shop Boys. Would you fancy mixing one of his tracks?" And I'm in no way a professional mixer or arranger, so like somebody like Pete Gledell is. But I just do my own thing, on my computer at home, and Damien liked what I did, and I think it turned out well. And to answer your question, that is very much the future. I mean, I've never met Damien, don't know if I ever will, but I've worked with him and I've worked on his stuff, and we did a similar kind of like Zoom kind of like meeting where I talked through the track with him, and he asked me to do certain things on it in the mix and etc. So it's revolutionized really the whole working collaborative process, in music. Only for the best, I think.
Well, on the subject of SoundCloud, you have a large amount of Slipstream material which has been put up over the last few years, which doesn't appear on any releases yet. What are your have you got plans for the future with Slipstream?
There is. We've got enough tracks now for another album, which I'm thinking of calling Slip Tones. It's just a case of lockdown permitting. If the next time I can hook up with Pete and we can sequence the album together, decide which tracks that we want to put on it, and which some tracks might need remixing or a little tinkering with, etc. But the whole lockdown thing kind of like put the mockers on that. I am meeting up with Pete next week because he coincidentally enough has relatives in Northampton. So hopefully we'll discuss something like that, how we will do the next album. But a lot of the stuff I put up on SoundCloud is just demos that I've done at home, which I think will work. Some of them Pete actively says, no, can't work on that one, etc. And but that doesn't stop me from still just putting the demos up there.
Well, whether we'd agree with him or not, I guess it's good to have someone being your independent quality control.
Yes,
exactly. And they're still there for us to enjoy if he doesn't go any further with them. So. Well, look, we will definitely be looking forward to anything that comes out next. And it's great that we've already got so much to enjoy. And I hope some people will be encouraged to investigate some of it after our talks.
There is one funny anecdote which has just come to mind, actually. I was walking up to my parents' house. Oh, this must have been about 6 or 7 or 8 years ago. And there was this guy on the same street that my parents live. And he was up a ladder working on his house, doing some painting or something. And I was walking past and he shouted down, he said, "Oh, Mark." I said, "Oh, all right, Paul, how you doing?" He said, "I've just heard you on the radio." I said, "What are you talking about?" This was like in the afternoon, in the week, midweek, about 3 o'clock or something. He said, "Yeah, it's the Chris Evans show on the radio." And he's just done this competition, not a competition, but just like a question that he wants people to find the link to. And the question was, what is the link between Spiritualized and Pet Shop Boys? And I thought, wow, what are the odds of me walking past at that particular moment in time and him being up his window, just hearing that on the radio? Because if I hadn't have heard him say it, there's no way I would have heard about that. And
it reminds me of going back to Simon Wollstonecraft. The motivation he had for getting round to writing his book was when he was the answer to a question on Mastermind.
Yeah.
The question was, who was the original drummer with the Smiths?
Yeah.
And the guy got it right as well. So, and I think that's what kicked him off on that one.
Yeah. I remember seeing somebody on University Challenge once. She's like a modern day celebrity or well-known person. And they were doing this version of University Challenge where people like that were the teams. Ex-Oxbridge alumni or something like that. And there was a picture of her in her younger days wearing the Angel and Devil t-shirt of, Laser Guided Melodies era.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for all the time you've given us over not only today for this last part of the interview, but all the things we've done previously. We found it absolutely fascinating. I hope some other people have as well. But, it's been a great chat and we look forward enormously to seeing some new material in the future. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Well, enormous thanks again to Mark for all the time he spent with us. I think that's a really interesting part of the interview. And I must also say, this sort of got lost in the middle of the conversation, but massive thanks as well to Graham Duff, who, no notice at all, responded to the request of some randomer off the internet to come on and have a chat about Mark. And I think that fitted in extremely well.
His comments actually made me go and seek out some of the bits and bobs that he was talking about. And indeed, Slipstream's version of True Love Will Find You in the end is very different to other cover versions. You might have heard of that, and does exactly what Mark says it would do, with a little bit of kind of upbeat, more of a kind of a sort of a flowery feel. Right? It was just, I just think it's a lovely version.
It is lovely, and it's great that we've got the contrast in the 3 different Spacemen related versions.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it would be hard for anyone to displace my preference for the Spectrum version, but that's not really a fair comparison because it's part of that, my favorite Spectrum era from my favorite post Spacemen 3 solo album. Anything that's that sort of Soul Kiss era is always going to score very highly, and I do think that Pete did a great job with that version. But yeah, Slipstreams is a great alternative way of dealing with it.
Yeah, well, I certainly never heard it done like that before, so thumbs up from me.
He's very recently actually put on a cover with the same sort of tempo and feel to it of I Can See Clearly.
Oh, I heard that too.
And
that's also very upbeat.
I hope Mark won't mind me saying, because we didn't talk about this during the interview, but I chatting with him about it separately. He said to me, oh yeah, I wouldn't normally have covered that sort of thing, but my sister had a dream saying that she dreamt that I'd covered it, so I had to.
Brilliant.
To which I replied, Mark Refoy, the man who makes dreams come true. So, yeah, well, what a great experience that's been for us. We've really enjoyed every part of that, and I hope that...
Well, that was meant to be one interview.
I know. Yeah,
so fascinating.
We started off doing the first bit and realizing how long we'd gone on for, and we were chatting at the end saying, oh, well, we're going to have to split it into two, and then realizing we hadn't even got the last bit, anything post-spiritualized done, and we were all set to do that when suddenly it was, oh, can we go back and talk about pure phase? And that filled, we could have gone on longer
Very
on that as well. Yeah. Something else that came out, you were saying, Mark, about going to check out some of Graham Duff's things, but we noticed that he's recently set up a label. You were looking at the 7-inch he's put out so far.
Yeah. Talk about lavishly packaged. I mean, it is a beautiful thing. Sadly, only 100 copies, completely sold out. But it is actually worth going and looking at the website to see how beautifully he's actually done these. And hopefully there'll be some more in the pipeline. But I'm sure you can add a link to that, Ian.
Yeah, the label's called Heaven's Lathe. I shall put a link to its Bandcamp page. As you say, that is, I think there's just been the 1 7-inch so far. Yeah, 100 copies. You're not going to get one of those. But it's interesting that he has left the music itself up as a free download. So if you're interested in just listening to it, that's going to be something you can do anyway. No, it looks absolutely lovely. I mean, lots of people are doing these special vinyl pressings, but this one really does look like that he's gone to town on the whole look and feel of it. It's lovely.
It does.
Okay, well, next time we will be back to just chatting some Spacemen 3 nonsense, probably just the two of us again. It's been great to do an interview, and I hope we'll get some more before too much longer, but for the sake of having a bit of variety and giving everyone a bit of a breather, we'll just get back to doing a bit of nattering about that. We'll probably also go back to what was our original plan of a monthly schedule rather than every couple of weeks. We wanted to get the interview out in fairly quick succession so that it didn't take up a big chunk of a year. But until then, we've been Spacemen Pod. Thanks for coming.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.